Well, folks, here we are again on Healthcare Unfiltered, and we have another episode pertaining to the ABIM and the MOC, Maintenance of Certification, Recertification, and the American Board of Internal Medicine. I'm joined today by Dr. Bryan Carmody, who is going to introduce himself in a little bit, but as I said in the introduction, there's a lot of things happening, and I believe social media has led to a unified voice pertaining to the ABIM and MOC. I had tweeted something that is of interest. I want to make sure that Bryan knows about this as we start this conversation. I tweeted the following, Bryan. I said, if you are a physician who believes that the ABIM maintenance of certification and recertification program is essential for physicians' competency and better patient care, I invite you to come on the Healthcare Unfiltered podcast to discuss. You must not have any conflict of interest on the ABIM. I have not received yet anybody who has actually direct messaged me. By the time we air this in September, we will see if anybody would respond. So welcome to the show, and let's start by a quick intro as to who Bryan Carmody is.
Well, I'm happy to be here. So, yeah, I'm a pediatric nephrologist. Actually, I don't have any skin in the game with ABIM. Although, in fairness, I do with the American Board of Pediatrics, which, in all relevant regards, is substantially similar to the ABIM. But you and I met, I guess, on Twitter in response to some of the conversations that have been happening there related to. This petition that that Dr. Goodman started and continues to get support, and in response to that, I highlighted and put out a video of my own that this petition's fine, and I encourage people to sign it as a way of showing support for this issue, but to not lose sight of the fact that a petition by itself is not going to do much. So that's how I guess you and I became acquainted, and how I ended up here today.
And we're going to talk about some of the solutions that you propose. But how did you end up doing pediatric and nephrology? Is that something you always wanted to do? Was it influenced by a mentor? How did this end up?
Well, I think it's beyond reasonable dispute that the kidney is the most beautiful organ in the human body.
Of course.
On every level. And so naturally, that drew me in.
Yeah. No, how could you argue that?
I actually had, if you'd seen me in medical school, I thought I was going to be an internist. I liked everything about internal medicine, and actually only switched to pediatrics at the time that residency applications were due, when I sort of realized that many of the things that I liked about medicine also apply to pediatrics. So I sort of went in with the idea that I'd be a specialist, and I liked the role that pediatric nephrologists have. For kids that have end-stage kidney disease or CKD, we're all in for those kids, and we see them through dialysis and transplant, and it's you get to have that sustained relationship with patients, but yet you also you get to be a consultant. You get to come and help on other patients that often have interesting or challenging problems, and that's gratifying. And so it felt like a good fit for me.
Actually, I have to admit, I didn't. So I obviously know there are pediatric oncologists, pediatric hematologists, but I didn't know that every subspecialty, also in pediatrics. In other words, I wasn't necessarily aware that the nephrologists, adult nephrologists, do not deal with kids' kidney disease at all. That's obviously, shortcoming of my part, but is there that much difference in terms of managing, like an adult nephrologist is unable to manage pediatric nephrology?
Well, in one sense, there's not much difference. End-stage kidney disease is end-stage kidney disease, but in a sense, it is different. If you look at the reasons that patients end up with end-stage kidney disease, among adult patients, it's very heavily diabetes, hypertension, a little bit of polycystic kidney disease, and then a smattering of little things. If you make a pie chart, and actually when I teach our medical students, I have a graphic that shows this very thing that I'll try to describe verbally. But if you look at a pie chart of the causes of end-stage kidney disease in pediatric patients, it's all over the place. many things are sort of rare diseases that, you may only have a couple of patients with over your whole career, and yet they're important diseases to manage, and you sort of become the expert in those things. And I think that makes it challenging and fun. When you're on call, I mean, you could be challenged with, I mean, I suppose that's true for many physicians, but you could be challenged with something that, that you've never seen before, that you have to become the expert in. And I think that's one of the most challenging but gratifying things about a job like this.
So going back to the core of the conversation, before you saw all of this, like Petition and everything going on, and I appreciate you listening to the podcast that I aired with Rich Barron, Aaron Goodman, and Wes Fisher. Was this a topic of interest to you, or did your interest peak when you saw these conversations, or is this something you have been interested in for years? And tell me a little bit about American Boards of Pediatrics. How does it differ than the American Boards of Internal Medicine?
Yeah. MOC and the board organizations themselves are not something that I would say that is a special focus of my interest, but it's sort of adjacent to a lot of things that I do care about. And so to the extent that I'm known as anything other than a pediatric nephrologist, I'm known as the Sheriff of Sodium, and I have a blog and a YouTube channel and comment upon things usually in sort of the medical education, medical training space. And so a lot of that stuff, I mean, the things that I care about most sort of get adjacent to or have some of the same issues that come up with MOC. So it's something that I've never, I believe as a matter of principle, I try not to pop off about stuff that I don't feel like I have something meaningful to add to the conversation. And so I haven't talked much about MOC, but it is something that I've sort of quietly been following for some time, and going back to, some years. And Dr. Wes's, I guess I probably heard of Dr. Wes maybe 2016, 2017, thereabout, and started following some of his stuff.
So in pediatrics, what's the difference? Like, you guys also you have to pass the boards.
Yeah, it's essentially the same. It's in fact, it's actually a little bit more expensive than ABIM, really, just because it's a somewhat smaller specialty, and so some of the costs are fixed. But yeah, so in pediatrics, you when you complete your general pediatrics residency, you can certify with the general pediatrics certifying exam. If you want to certify in a subspecialty like pediatric nephrology or pediatric infectious disease or pediatric hematology, or any of those, then that's an additional exam. And then you enter the maintenance of certification process for pediatrics, which is similar to the ABIMs. I completed my last MOC cycle in 2022, just this past fall, which means for the next 5 years, I'm doing multiple choice questions and collecting these MOC points that have to be of 4 different types, so that in 5 years I can continue to, get that.
Well, it's forever. It's forever.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you live and you want to be practicing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I glanced at the current pricing, which for MOC for pediatrics, it's $294 a year or $1397 for 5 years to just maintain your general pediatrics. If you want to maintain 2 certificates, it's $412 a year or $1982 for 5 years.
And you still, this is only the cost, but after those 5 years, you keep paying for the next 5 years.
Right.
And
exactly.
then you still have to take the test and the exams, regardless of how much you practice, how often you're practicing, and CME, all of that stuff.
Right. So, the ABIM and the ABP, some of the decision making, like, they outsource to the state licensing authorities. So you have to have a full and unrestricted medical license to recertify or to certify. So, anything related to your personal character or disciplinary history or things like that, the ABIM or ABP vouches for it, but they've outsourced that authority to the state licensing board, and then, build it into their certification.
So the idea here is that, the ABIM has instituted this process by which, number one, you have to pay every year. And number two is you have to continue taking exams and questions. And I want you to put on the hat of a non-doctor. somebody who's watching this, and they're going to say, really, guys, what's the big deal? I mean, you're doctors. You can take an exam every so often to make sure you're okay. And, you can afford $1,000 or, $200, whatever it is. Like, they're not going to get sympathy from a cost perspective. So help the non-doctors who are listening maybe sympathize or understand the value of it, or should they care?
Yeah. All right. Well, I got two comments about that, I guess. The first is sort of a comment to doctors about what you said, which I think I agree completely with you. This is not a topic upon which physicians can or should expect support from the general public. I mean, we can complain about these, $200 and some dollar, fees from the board, but, tell that to patients. Find out how much they paid the last time they saw you for a 15-minute office visit. And so I think many physicians, because of the injustice of all this, they feel that, this is naturally going to resonate with the general public, and it will not. So I agree with you completely on that. And I'd make that comment to the doctors. To the public, I would say, the premise of certification, I mean, you're right. And this is one of the challenges that I think we have in arguing against it, is that as sort of a general logical argument, it makes sense. I mean, it simply does not make sense that you could take a test one time and be guaranteed to be good at that forever. That's not the case. And so the idea, the face validity of something like that, I think, is high. You want your doctors to be good. I think the problem is that in reality, as you and others have highlighted recently, there's little, if any, good evidence that these exams or that these processes do what they say they're going to do, that they actually improve the quality of care, or if they're just sort of another source of wasted effort and resources. I would further say that, at the end of the, I did listen to, both Dr. West's episode and the episode with Dr. Barron and Dr. Goodman. At the end of the of your episode with Dr. Goodman and Dr. Barron, Dr. Barron was, I think it was in his closing remarks, he said something eloquent about how, the public and the hospitals, they're looking to us so they know who to trust. And, when you hear him say that on first pass, it may sound good. You're like, yeah, I mean, we all want doctors you can trust. But if you think about it for more than a few seconds, it sort of begs a question. Why do we want to have doctors that you can't trust? I mean, why do we want a system where we have, doctors with a capital D with the ABIM stamp of approval, and then, charlatans who are fully licensed but not ABM certified, out there practicing? Why would we ever want a system like that? And even if you believe that the ABM certificate is valid, why would that be a system that we would choose for our people? Why would we not say we should only license trustable physicians? I think that, to me, that would be how I would like to ask that to Dr. Barron. I mean, why would that not be a responsibility of the licensing authority? Why would we want physicians that you can't trust?
That's a very good question, actually. I mean, you're right, because technically you can be licensed to practice medicine in a particular state, but not ABIM certified. They're not actually seeing eye to eye. So why is this not part of the license? The other thing you mentioned is, well, there's no evidence that, the recertification help patient care. This is very tough to show, though. Would you agree? I mean, it's not really like if me and you say, let's design a study. And I challenged Dr. Barron about this, but in all fairness, it's not always easy to do a study like this. Like, am I going to randomize folks to take questions versus those who don't take questions? And then I'm going to see patient outcomes. The more I think about it, not everything we can answer, Bryan, with a randomized control study.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, that's one of the challenges. And I guess, I mean, I don't know if I want to tip my hand, this early in our discussion, but I mean, that's one reason, sort of among many, that I feel that the best strategy is really to sort of mitigate the harms of MOC. I think that overturning it, getting rid of it, is a hard thing to do for many reasons. And I think the better plan, or the more realistic plan, is simply to have a less harmful, more helpful system.
Do you think the public cares about burnout. I mean, we talk about burnout. I think we can discuss how we define it, but when you're burnt out, and I think it's a very hard job. Does the public care? That the burnout argument?
I think the public certainly cares about burnout, but probably not burnout per se. I mean, they certainly care about the consequences of physician burnout, because of the negative impact that has on, getting an appointment with your doctor, having the things that you want accomplished at that visit or occurring, to improve your health, or, I think people certainly care about that. But I think you're right. I think doctors, if you're around just doctors, it's easy to think that our problems are unique, and we're suffering uniquely from burnout, and maybe in some ways we are. But I think people are burning out lots of places. I think wage workers and people with regular jobs, they got hard jobs, they're burning out. And so I don't think it's a unique problem among physicians. Maybe some of the things that go into it are, but I guess I'm not sure that it's reasonable to expect the public to care about that problem for doctors per se. The consequences of that problem, yeah.
So you posted a video, and in the video you proposed solutions. What I liked about your video was actually calm. It's very easy to understand what you're talking about, even if you're not really a physician. I also like the fact you gave grades to each of your own proposed solutions. So what I want to do is I want to go through each one and discuss each one with you and the grade, and see if any of this is practical. And then maybe we'll come up with maybe some path forward. So solution number one, what was it?
Oh, let me look and see. What was that? I think that was get involved with the board.
I think it was get involved with the board. I wasn't too happy with that one, I'm not gonna lie, but I did give you a chance. I kept listening after that one.
Yeah, good. Well, I bring up that one because, a few years ago, one of the things that I was a big critic of was certain policies of the United States Medical Licensing Exam, USMLE. And I tried very hard to get people to think about some of that stuff in a different way. And I would always get these people direct messaging me, or, reaching out to me privately and saying, you got to get involved with us. You got to come and write some questions and, do all this stuff. And I was very, very skeptical that would do a whit of good for anybody. In fact, I felt like it was a way probably just to shut me up. And I feel that in reality, anybody who has strong feelings on this issue, you can go and devote some free labor to the board of your choice if you want, and write some questions and go to some meetings and meet some nice people. I'm sure that's true. Are you going to make real change? No, I don't. And I think you're actually sort of voluntarily choosing to put a muzzle on yourself, because you won't feel right about, saying things that are negative about the organization for which you volunteer your services and the new friends that you've made. And so I'm very skeptical that that's going to do much good for anybody other than the boards.
And if you put yourself in the physician shoes, you kind of feel, it's an honor. You are going to write questions that determines, right. I'm going to write questions that going to tell me if you're good or not. That gives me that, halo effect, right?
Right.
This is great. I can put a line item on my CV. It's a good thing. So I can understand the sense of glory that you may get by doing that.
Right. Right. And of course, that's, for any listeners who are unaware, it is important to note that the questions that are written for these board exams, they're not written by some question writing pro that's on salary by the board. They're all questions that are originally generated by faculty members or physicians in those subject areas for free, for nothing more than a pat on the head and a line.
Basically by our colleagues.
Yes, correct.
So, Bryan, let's say everyone decides not to write questions. Problem solved?
Well, probably not. I mean, in the first place, that's unrealistic to think that, I mean, you could get 100% of physicians to do anything. I mean, the corollary of that is the people that say, oh, well, let's just all quit doing MOC at the same time. It's like, it's unrealistic. I mean, you can't get, 100% of physicians to do anything, period. But I mean, secondly, if they had to pay somebody to write questions, I'm sure they can, or they can train a, chat GPT to, spit out some questions for them. I think it benefits them in terms of the questions themselves to say, when you get some crummy question, well, this was made by your colleagues. This was, this trashy question was created by, the experts in the field. So,
yeah. But it's interesting. I think the public needs to know that these questions are written by our colleagues and it's for free. And I think there's an opportunity there. But you gave that about a D, I believe. That's great. I think that's what you gave.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
D or something. Okay, let's go to solution number 2. Or at least proposal number 2, or, again, what did you think?
So, for that, I think I highlighted that, another thing we can do is kick up dust on social media. You can talk about it on Twitter or X or, on your YouTube or Reddit or any other number of places. And that's good. I mean, it's a good thing to do. That's the way that people find out about a lot of stuff these days. I mean, obviously that's the reason that, you and I are having this conversation now. And if you're not talking about this stuff, well, you're sort of depending on every individual physician who's frustrated when they have to do this MOC stuff. You're depending on them to do all their own original research that, Dr. West has done over the past 15 or 20 years and figure out, de novo, all the things that are already known, that are problematic about this, and that's obviously inefficient. I mean, there has to be some momentum, that spreads information and highlights the issue, and that's good. So social media is good, but I think where it fails is I sometimes get the feeling when I see some of these conversations on social media that people think that's going to be sufficient, and it just simply will not. I mean, as you highlighted, I mean, ABIM is it's a large organization whose executives are handsomely compensated. There's no amount of retweets that's going to make them just sigh and turn out the lights in their Philadelphia headquarters and flip the sign to closed and just walk out. They got us, guys. They hit this many. That's just not going to happen. So you've got to realize that if you want something more than just social media anger to occur, you have to translate the energy and the activism that's occurring online into some other real avenue that's going to target some of the structural issues that support, this process.
So you are pro social media, but what you're saying is by itself is not enough.
Exactly. Yeah. By itself, I mean, that petition, I mean, the last I looked at it had what, like 12 or 14,000. It's got more than that.
We're close to 18,000.
Yeah, right. And that's wonderful. But I mean, what's going to happen if it had 19, 20, 25, 50? I mean, there's no number at which something automatically happens,
But I mean, and that's the question. One of the questions I asked on my podcast with Rich Bear and Aaron Goodman, it was a confrontational question. I'm not going to lie. I did ask this Dr. Barron. I said, Dr. Barron, you are the CEO and president of an organization called the ABIM. You have a petition from over 10,000 of your shareholders. These are technically your shareholders because these are the people that essentially are paying the fees that eventually lead to your salary. So these are your shareholders. Over 10,000 of your shareholders at the time have signed that you are not doing a good job. In any organization, you would be called by the board of directors into the boardroom to have a conversation. So, there is power in number.
There is. The hard thing is, though, that I think you have to recognize that these boards, they have an unusual business model. I mean, they take money from physicians, but in a way, the customer of their product, the customer for certification is not the person who's giving them money. The customer for certification is the hospital, the insurance plan. Those are the people who want this information. And so you're right. If a normal company had their customers or their shareholders saying we're dissatisfied, well, that's an existential threat to the company. If all of Apple's customers say, the new iPhone sucks and we don't like it, they're going to listen because that's, they're giving you the product and they're taking the money from you. But that's not exactly the case with ABIM. I mean, they are in a sense giving you the product, but that's not really the market for that product.
Do you think the number of signatures might let healthcare institutions and hospitals pay attention? I mean, essentially, you're right? I mean, the hospitals, the ABIM has convinced hospitals that we are able to tell you the good doctors from bad doctors for you to employ and keep on your staff and give them credentials to admit patients to your hospital. We are the arbitrator between the good and the bad doctors based on this program and recertification. If we have 20, 30, 50,000 signatures, would that lead hospitals to say, you know what, let's just pause a little bit and try to understand, maybe there's something there?
I don't think so. I don't think, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I don't think hospital executives, they don't care about petitions or anything like that. They care about their bottom line. They care about the actual economic impacts of having MOC or not. And so they care about their reimbursement from payers. They care about their their credentialing and the appearance of quality that they can give to the public. And they care about those things to the extent that they impact the revenue of the organization. And so I don't think that unless you address those other supports or issues, they will continue to make the same decisions that they have to date.
Would payers pay attention to a petition like this?
I don't think so. I mean, this may, do you want to talk about that aspect of this thing now or wait till the end? I kind of put that at the end of the video, but I don't mind talking about that.
No, let's leave it till the end. Let's go on to solution number 3.
All right, what do we have for 3? So solution 3 was to go grassroots, we sort of touched on this a little bit before. I mean, the questions come from volunteers. In theory, like you said, we could just stop writing them. Or you could tell your colleagues, like, I mean, you really want to be doing that? I mean, do you really want to support this program, or potentially if you were in a position to, like I said, faculty do this for academic capital. If you're on the promotion and tenure committee, I mean, it certainly is within your discretion to sort of not value that so highly if you wanted. And in theory, that would take away, one of the things that the boards, I mean, it would take away the product that they then, the volunteer service that they then monetize into these other things. But in reality, I mean, that's unrealistic. I mean, there's enough physicians that I think are true believers in the ABIM's mission, even though they've declined your invitation to get canceled on social media. There's a handful, I think, of true believers. And then there's aspirants to the, ABIM throne and fortune, and people who want to, they see the people at the top and they want to be them. Or there's just people that, like I say, they're eager for a pat on the head and a line on their CV, and they'll continue to do it. And so you could probably convince some people, but I think this is, probably altogether unrealistic.
Yeah, so the grassroots and not doing this, you did not give this a high mark because it's just not possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Number 4.
Number 4 is to support a competitor. And so, Dr. Fisher talked about this, the formation of the National Board of Physicians and Surgeons. So, you can maintain your certification through the American Board of Pediatrics or American Board of Internal Medicine or whatever your specialty board is. Or you can get a recertification, is what they call it, through the NBPAS. And what they do is they verify your initial credentials. So you can't get the NBPAS certificate unless you have originally gotten, a certificate from one of the ABMS member boards. But then they'll re-credential you as long as you're meeting your CME. And so if you're doing your continuing medical education and you're submitting those credits, then they will vouch that you are, recertified and you get their seal of approval. The problem is that not many hospitals accept their vouching. I looked in my own state. There were 2 hospitals in the state of Virginia that accept NBPAS. And reading between the lines a little bit, there are hospitals that are in rural areas that are, I think it's probably very challenging for them to fill staff vacancies. And I think it probably is a benefit to those hospitals. Getting back to the point I made before, this has to be worth the hospital's while. I think nationwide, if you take all the hospitals, it's probably about 1% of hospitals accept this, recertification from NBPAS. So you could do it. If you do it now, you're sort of going to have to pay NBPAS and your specialty board if you want to continue gainfully practicing medicine at a hospital, because your hospital is not likely to accept it. So in the short term, I think this is a solution that doesn't have, because there's just not much uptake. It would take a lot of physicians doing this. I think the other issue is that many of the people who are the most vocal in this debate, they don't want an alternative system. They want to get rid of MOC. They want it gone altogether. And even though I don't think that's an easy thing to do, I think that's actually pretty unrealistic. They don't want a different boss that's just going to charge them a lower price for a more, acceptable product.
Yeah. And the alternative program you referred to, Bryan, I don't think you can get that at ACGME accredited hospitals, because the ACGME mandates ABIM to be able to have residency and fellowship programs. I believe that the hospitals accept that, like you said, could be rural hospitals, likely don't have residency and fellowship programs.
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting things that I actually did not know. I sort of felt ashamed that I did not know that when I heard Dr.
I didn't know either until I spoke with Wes.
I will say I have not been able to verify that myself. Now, I haven't spent an inordinate amount of time on it, but I did review the ACGME core program requirements and the specialty program requirements for pediatrics. I could not find that in there. There is a requirement that the program director has to have current certification through their, whatever specialty they're the program director for. There is a requirement for that. And it has to be from an ABMS or AOA board. But I actually could not find written that.
Yeah, we probably should look at that. Maybe things are changing, but I'm sure we can find this on the website of the alternative thing. Okay, so these are 4 solutions so far, none of them too attractive. I do like the social media continuation, although I realize by itself is not really enough. What else do you have? What other solutions do we have next?
Option 5 is to look closely at the board's finances, and that all stems from the experience that Dr. Fisher was describing in his episode about several years ago with the ABIM. There was a forensic accountant named Charles Kroll who looked into the finances, and as you heard, a lot of it looked pretty fishy. About the way that they were handling deferred revenue to sort of seemingly conceal a cash crunch and coming up with new products in order to help their finances. My thought is that this is probably not likely to be an effective strategy at this point, in part because the boards have been burned once by this before. I mean, with everything that happened in 2016, 2017, 2015, whatever that was. So you would hope that they cleaned up their accounting practices a little bit. At the same time, this is sort of like the social media stuff where I think it should be done. I mean, I think the finances should be scrutinized, and I feel strongly about that. And one of the funny things about that is that from time to time, like I said, I've harped on other organizations' finances and the greed and waste. In particular, several years ago, among other things, I wrote a paper about financial conflict of interest at the National Board of Medical Examiners. And a lot of people, especially people who were sort of adjacent to the board, tried to, tried to like dad me on it and say, you're making yourself look bad. You shouldn't talk about money. Why are you always talking about their money? And it really gets my goat because, and so I'm going to take a moment to sort of get on a platform and say this. These organizations, these nonprofit organizations, when we say nonprofit, what we mean is that they're tax exempt. They are not paying income tax. Okay. And so all the roads or bridges or social service programs or whatever that could have been made with their income, society is foregoing that. And we're foregoing those tax dollars in exchange. The bargain is that they're doing something that's a social good. And in return, to make sure that that bargain is being upheld, they have to submit certain financial information on their Form 990 tax return. Those things are public, and they are made public for a reason. And that reason is so that the general public can inspect them and ensure that the organization's dollars are meeting the mission, that they're fulfilling that social contract. And so I think this should be done, but I think that the boards are wizened up enough now that they're going to avoid some of the missteps that they've made in the past.
Well, I mean, they still have to disclose, like the Form 990. It doesn't, I mean, if they're non-for-profit, it's really important. But I really love the fact that you highlighted the not-for-profit is basically a tax-exempt code. It does not mean you're not really making a profit. Clearly, you are making a profit.
Right. Exactly. And unfortunately, the profit that you're making becomes a weight around your neck in a certain way. And this is what the natural history of these organizations is that, a for-profit company that takes in more money than they need, well, they can distribute that money to their shareholders as a dividend and everybody will be happy, but a nonprofit company has to reinvest that in its mission. So what happens is that you have a nonprofit company, they take in their revenue that they feel they need to take in, and just through sort of good general business sense, they don't want to cut their margin too close. You don't want to have a budget of 50 million and then have 60 million in expenses. So if you think you're going to have 50 million in expenses, well, why don't we set our prices so that we take in 55 million or 60 million? But now when you have that money, it sort of creates a problem because you've got to reinvest it in yourself. So what you do is you make new programs, you hire new people, you do new stuff, and the organization grows bigger just to feed itself more. Yeah. And that's the natural history of these nonprofits.
That's amazing. I bet you there are a lot of folks who are listening to this who probably did not really know exactly this particular nuance, which is really important. Next solutions, because we're going to solve this today, right? I mean, we're going to solve the problem.
Well, you're going to get my opinion on it. That's all. I'm
telling you, you're in the hook to solve this. I titled the episode "Solutions."
So option 6 is to call your state legislator, and if you truly want to end MOC, I think there's really only 2 ways that can occur, and this would be one of them. Is that you would have to make it illegal. You would have to convince your state legislators to pass a law saying, let it be known that from now on, physicians and hospitals and so on are not allowed to require MOC for the things that they're requiring for. And laws get made all the time and stuff like that happens. So
you heard about the Florida Medical Association resolution.
Well, actually, several years ago, after the Charles Kroll, revealing of the ABIM finances and all the uproar after that, there was a wave of interest in this strategy. And so, Dr. Fisher mentioned it. I mean, in many states, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida tried to put one through. I can't remember, Kentucky, Michigan. Medical associations tried to put forward legislation that would do this. But what happened was that the hospital associations and the insurance organizations lobbied against it and either neutered the legislation or kept it corralled in committee. So several states did pass versions of the law, but essentially they were limited to saying things like, you can't require MOC for licensure, which nobody does. So it's sort of a law that makes no practical difference.
Yeah.
So if you want to pursue this strategy, I think it's going to be a real uphill battle because unfortunately the hospital associations, the insurers, they're deep pocketed. They're well tied in to the state capital. They have many people who look out for their interest. They employ lots of constituents. On the other hand, other than sort of a sense of justice, it's hard to get politicians to see what's in this for them. Doctors are not that big of a, a voting bloc or a lobby. I mean, there is some money that, gets given to certain candidates, but I mean, compared to the amount that's thrown around by the opposite side in this is, minimal.
We're up to number 7.
All right, option 7 would be the other option that I think you have if you want to end MOC, and that is to hire an attorney. Because if you can't pass a new law, and it's been difficult to do that, you still have all the old existing laws that could be brought to bear on something that honestly feels like it should be illegal. I mean, it does not feel like it should be allowable to have this MOC system. It smacks of a protection racket. I mean, it seems like the mafia guys on the street of New York that are like, going to the fruit vendor and saying, you need to buy protection so nobody knocks over your fruit cart. And they're like, well, who's going to knock over my fruit cart?
What's the attorney suing for? Like, what's the damage in order to sue, right? What's the damage?
Exactly. So the theory that continues to be tested, but has been tested against the ABIM specifically, is that this is an antitrust violation. So that it is an impermissible monopoly on this maintenance of certification that the ABIM holds, and that they use that monopoly power to charge whatever fees that they want, and we have to buy it without much say in the matter. And so the theory of the case before was that physicians sign up to take the initial certifying exam, and that was a separate product, that's a deal that you make with the company, but then it's tied to you continuing to purchase this other stuff, and that generally wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, the court did not buy that argument. They said that that's not true, that these are not two products, they're the same product. The product is certification, and you can do it with a test, or you can do it with these multiple choice questions, but it's one thing that the ABIM is selling, and that thing is just time limited.
So the courts did not buy the antitrust piece.
Exactly. Right. They have not so far. So there is still a suit pending for the American Board of Neurology. And I mean, Dr. Fisher seemed optimistic about it. I am less optimistic. And I think that I have 2 additional reservations, even if this started to get momentum. Number 1 would be, now, I mean, to his point, I had an interaction with him on Twitter where, he said, if the case goes to trial and a judge orders discovery, that alone would disrupt and bankrupt their operations. And I think that's true. But it'll leave, I mean, if the ABIM disappeared, it would leave a void that would be filled by some other similar entity, I think.
Or by nobody.
Maybe, but I think it would be filled by somebody. And if it was filled by somebody, even a court decision that says that this form of MOC is illegal, the court would have to articulate sort of the standard by which it could be made legal. And so I'm not sure it would be a durable solution. The second thing to think about is, I do have some content expertise in the history of the National Residency Matching Program's antitrust lawsuit. So you may be familiar with that, but the very brief overview is that back in the early 2000s, there was a high-profile antitrust lawsuit against the National Residency Matching Program and the Association of American Medical Colleges and the ACGME, saying that this monopoly on residency training served as a way to keep residents' salaries low, because residents can't choose what hospital they go to or negotiate their salary. And so there was a class action lawsuit that actually won some initial court victories. They were going to go to trial. And you know what happened then? Congress stepped in and passed legislation saying that the NRMP is specifically excluded from antitrust.
Oh gosh!
So yeah, you can. I'll send you the link to. I've got.
Gosh!
But because again, you've got to remember that hospitals have deep pockets. They employ a lot of people. They carry a lot of weight in their district. They have a lot of politicians that if the hospital executive gets on the phone and says, "I'm concerned about this," all of a sudden the politician is concerned about it. So there's no way to immunize yourself against some kind of last second legislative Hail Mary like that.
Other solutions? I mean, did we leave anything? Like, is there any solution left?
Well, I feel like the real way forward is, as I said, and this is a hard thing to talk about without making it seem like you're in favor of MOC. But I think that you've got to acknowledge that there is a certain logic to MOC if you accept that we should have initial certification. I think if you ask someone, hey, why aren't you complaining about initial certification? And they say whatever they say, it's hard then to logically pass a thread through the needle that you've just made between a justification that suits initial certification but doesn't suit MOC. I think that's logically hard to do.
I think sometimes you view that initial certification almost like your capstone project, like it's a final exam that you actually pass through where you do. I mean, I really don't think you would have any pushback against the initial certification. The reason you have the pushback against the recertification is because usually you're now practicing. You are seeing patients, you are dealing with your peers, you're dealing with patients, with families, you're going through the credentialing committee of the hospital if there are issues. You're licensed in one or two states, you're doing the CMEs. So that's really why people say, like, why am I doing this again? But before that, the initial certification, you're still not practicing, you don't have patient volume, you are not really doing the CME like you're supposed to do because your residency and fellowship are considered your CME. So that's really why you get the push. And the other thing that I forgot to ask in my prior podcast is, why is that 10-year grace period technically? Like, you get the initial certification, you don't have to do anything for the first 10 years. Yeah. It's after you finish the first 10 years, you have to do the recertification or longitudinal knowledge assessment, and you start paying the maintenance of certification. So your first 10 years, you're actually technically okay, I believe, unless this has changed. So who's to tell me it shouldn't be 9 years or 7 years or 11 years? Right. Like, seems to be, frankly, if you're really caring about advances in science and medicine and patient care, a full decade of no recertification seems too long if you want to use that argument.
Right. Well, to your first point, I agree. Maintenance of certification feels different, but I think if you sort of rigorously test that and you ask somebody, well, why do you think initial certification should be justified? I mean, I think you'll get some. I mean, if you push someone, I think you're likely to get something about, well, we have to make sure people have a certain standard or whatever. But then once those words have left your mouth, you're sort of on the hook for agreeing to MOC because, unfortunately, skills fade over time. I mean, like I said in my video, 20 years ago, I was in college taking organic chemistry, and I was doing pretty well. But brother, give me an organic chemistry problem right now, I couldn't do it, to save my family's life. I don't know it anymore. And I think, unfortunately, we all have had the experience.
But you're not supposed to know it, Bryan. You don't need to know it. If I give you a nephrology problem, you're going to know it.
Maybe. But I think we all, unfortunately, have had the problem of dealing with people who don't remain current. And I'll give you a quick example that came to mind when I was listening to something on your show that Dr. Barron said. I remember when I was in residency, I was a resident, I was the senior resident, I admitted a patient to the service. The patient, suffice to say, they had an indication for treating them with the antibiotic Zosyn. Following morning, I sign out the patient to the attending. And he tells me the plan, and the plan was to switch him to cephalosporin. And I said, well, curious, given this and that and the other thing, why you would want to switch him to cephalosporin? The answer was because they didn't have Zosyn when I trained. And, unfortunately, you probably know there are some boobs out there.
I don't disagree. Look, I don't disagree. I guess where I'm arguing is there are good doctors and bad doctors. There are good lawyers and bad lawyers. I don't see the lawyers taking the bar exam again and again. There are good financial planners and bad financial planners. They don't taking the CFP or CFA exam again and again. I think the argument is we all know there are good and bad doctors, but the dispute is this mechanism is not really the way to differentiate that. The mechanism is, frankly, if you are referring your patient to me, and you're seeing me really not doing good care, at some point you're going to pick up the phone and either talk to my boss or somebody. I mean, we deal with this all the time. A random test that happens at a random interval that gives me that stamp of approval that I am that knowledgeable seems to be so arbitrary and so non-convincing. I mean, so just because
Yeah.
I'm in the MOC right now today, I'm very competent.
No, I agree completely. So I think that the standard should not be, oh, this is a good doctor. I think the standard should be, we should only have competent doctors. I think that
Exactly.
that should be the standard.
Right.
Exactly. And to me, that is a responsibility not of the board, but of the state licensing authority.
Yep. Yeah. No, we agree. So in the last few minutes, I want to try to have a path forward. Like, look, I mean, we've talked about your practical solutions. You gave them grades. Some of them are easily done, such as, social media, all of this. I want to ask you one question and then see if there's any path forward. How about engaging our societies? Like in oncology, you've got the American Society of Clinical Oncology, or hematology. You've got I'm sure
Yeah.
there's American College of Pediatrics, there's nephrology. I mean, all of these medical societies where we pay tuitions, we pay fees for them, are they able to put pressure? I mean, they represent the physicians technically. Are we able to put pressure on them? That pressure could go into the ABIM, for example.
Um, I sort of feel similarly to what I said about the social media. I mean, it is helpful only to the extent that it sort of keeps momentum, spreads the word, but it still has to lead to some structural change. And, I went through this in my video, but I mean, I think one thing that's very important to do with this or with any other advocacy effort is to do a power analysis, to understand how the ABIM has acquired power and what continues to give it power. And, in my video, I gave the example of, if you were a high school student and you don't like your school's dress code. I mean, you can yell at the teacher who's writing you up for the infraction of the code, but the teacher doesn't have the power to do something different. The power is at least one step removed from that. You got to go to the principal. But maybe the principal's not even where this came from. Maybe the policy came from the school board, and you got to figure out some way to influence them, or maybe you get the idea that I'm saying. So for the ABIM, you got to think through what would happen if you didn't do your MOC. Well, you would not be listed as being currently certified, and you might lose your hospital privileges. So hospitals have to be leveraged. But hospitals, unfortunately, are being leveraged by another entity, and that is payers. Insurance plans have to undergo their own credentialing, their own accreditation. So insurance plans, and they often do that through the NCQA, which likes to see the ABMS certification. And so you got to go one step back. Even then, you'd have to influence that board in order to free the hands of the payers, in order to free the hands of the hospital, in order for you to be able to do what you wanted to do. So I think that there has to be more targeted advocacy toward those organizations. And I've got to say, and so when you get to the sort of the root of the power, you got to ask, well, what are their incentives? How do they have power? And I think that you're going to have a tough sell saying, we want to get rid of MOC and we don't want nothing in the place of it. I think that's a tough sell. And at the same time, I think that there are types of recertification that physicians accept and accept willingly. And I mean, I think one good example maybe is your ACLS or PAL certification. I mean, that's only good for 2 years. Nobody says, oh, well, you ran a code in residency and you passed this exam once, well, you're good for 20 years. Stuff changes. You got to
I think the difference is that you don't need to do the ACLS unless you
exactly
really want to practice ACLS.
Exactly. So there's a couple of differences. One is exactly as you said, you're not forced to do it. Some hospitals might require it, but I think that people would view that as being a just request by the hospital. You want to work in the cardiac care unit, well, you got to be ACLS certified. That makes sense, and I think the other thing is that it's not, I mean, I think that's one key difference, but I think there's some others there too. Another is that it's not that expensive. Although honestly, it's not that far off from MOC. It's like $100 and some for 2 years. But I think that physicians, it's not that burdensome. And I think that they do see the logic and the value add, I mean, overall.
you think investigative journalism or journal articles, or I mean, if somebody, I mean, look, I mean, it's, presidents resign sometimes because of an editorial written and that discovers a scandal. I mean, these things do happen.
I think it's a tough sell without something. I mean, I think we had our run at that with the ABIM's, finances in, 2015, 2016. I think the problem is that the logic of saying, oh, we do this because we want the public to have good doctors, that's simple, it's understandable, it resonates with the public. To argue against it, you have to sort of make a deeper explanation, and like whoever, was it Carville or somebody said, if you're explaining, you're losing. It's a more complicated argument to make.
Oh boy, Bryan, this was really enjoyable. A little on the depressing side because I'm not really sure we have solutions. Nonetheless, it was good discussion. My last question to you is, if we're having this conversation, me and you, in 2 years from now, I'm going to give it 2 years from now, about the ABIM and the MOC, do you think we'll be talking about exactly the same? Do you think we're going to have some progress?
I think there'll be some progress. I think it'll be hard to see. I mean, in reality, what I think is going to happen is that the social media furor is going to slowly die down. But at the same time, I think that the ABIM will be a little bit singed from the flames, and they're going to be a little bit careful about raising prices or adding some new burden for a period of time. I mean, I think that will happen. And I think that they will continue to work to do sort of what I'm suggesting, which is to make ABIM's MOC or ABP's MOC more relevant, more palatable, less likely to draw the ire of physicians. They're not going to abandon it altogether, but I think there will be some things that, either some little changes that occur or potentially some adverse changes that don't occur, that, in 2 years from now, because of this little firestorm.
Dr. Bryan Carmody, the Sheriff of Sodium. I'm going to link to his blog, website, as well as to the YouTube video in the podcast, so you can all see it. This was really wonderful. Dr. Bryan Carmody, thank you for coming on the Healthcare Unfiltered, talking about ABIM and the MOC, the gift that keeps on giving.
No, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.